The next meeting of the small council was overshadowed by the arrival of an emissary from Pike, bearing news that Balon Greyjoy was fortifying his fleet again. Robert, outraged, declared he would never trust the Greyjoys after their failed rebellion. Tywin calmly stated that a watchful stance was all that was needed. If Greyjoy intended to rise again, the Crown's fleets, with the Redwyne ships and perhaps the Lannister fleet from Lannisport, could crush him. Another potential conflict simmering on the edges of the realm. Another crisis that needed gold and men to contain. Ned stepped out onto a balcony after that council session, seeking a breath of fresh air. The horizon was a haze of yellow and gray, the city's rooftops lined with scavenging gulls. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Renly again. "Lord Stark," Renly said, inclining his head. "A moment." Ned nodded. "Of course." Renly looked around to ensure privacy. "I've decided to return to Storm's End soon. I can't stay in the capital forever, waiting for a crisis to drop into our laps." Ned couldn't blame him. "Safe travels, then. You'll let us know if you hear more from your scouts about the Sellswords or the Myrish ships." "Of course," Renly said. "And there's something else. I want you to know that if war does break out, be it with the Targaryens, Dorne, or these rumored forces in the east, I will stand by my brother's side, so long as it's in the realm's best interest. But if Tywin pushes the crown into madness, well, I might have to think otherwise." Ned appreciated the candor. "I understand. Let's hope we don't reach that point." Renly offered a faint smile. "Hope might be all we have left." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Ned alone with the weight of yet another confidence half-pledge. Renly might be ally or enemy, depending on how events unfolded. The realm was indeed a tangled knot. A fortnight later, King's Landing was struck by a brief but violent storm. The wind howled, lashing the rooftops with rain, toppling market stalls, and sending the poor scurrying for shelter. The Red Keep's walls dripped with rivulets of water, and the great hall felt damp and chill. During this storm, Ned received an urgent summons from none other than Tywin Lannister himself. The message was curt. "Lord Stark, attend me in my solar at once." Ned obeyed, mindful that Tywin rarely made personal requests unless it was critical. He arrived to find Tywin standing by a brazier for warmth, the flames casting eerie flickers across the older man's austere features. His gold-flecked green eyes focused on Ned the moment he entered. "Close the door," Tywin commanded. Ned did so, and they were alone. Tywin didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I have become aware of a certain rumor that there are lords in the Vale who wish to align against Lannister interests, and you have been named as a possible ringleader or ally in this scheme." His tone was ice. Ned's heart seized. He had not taken any overt steps toward Baelish's suggestions, but apparently rumors were swirling nonetheless. "I am no ringleader," he said carefully, "but there are lords in the Vale who remain loyal to the memory of Jon Arryn. Some resent how quickly the Lannisters gained power after his death." Tywin's gaze was unrelenting. "Indeed, resentment is a dangerous thing. I would remind you that, as Hand of the King, you have a duty to quell such factions. The crown cannot function if every region begins plotting independently." Ned bridled at the hypocrisy. "I have no intention of fomenting rebellion, but neither am I your puppet, Lord Tywin. If you fear a conspiracy, perhaps you should look to how your family's hold on the throne has grown so obvious. Lords dislike being strangled by debt." For a moment, Tywin's face registered the faintest flicker of anger, but he concealed it swiftly. "The realm needs stability. My gold is the only thing standing between the crown and bankruptcy. Remember that." Ned returned his gaze steadily. "I have not forgotten." Tywin nodded once, curtly. "See that you do not. I want the Vale quiet, the North quiet, and the Riverlands quiet. If lords there suspect the King's Hand is turning a blind eye to their sedition, they may act. We cannot afford war now, not with the possibility of Targaryen threats across the sea. If I sense that you are allowing these factions to strengthen, I will take steps to neutralize them myself." Ned's fingers twitched at the open threat. "Are you threatening me, Lord Tywin?" Tywin didn't blink. I am informing you. Do not confuse the two. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken fury. Finally, Ned spoke through gritted teeth. Is that all you wish to say? It is, Tywin replied. You may go. Ned left, seething. The nerve of Tywin Lannister to accuse him of meddling, when House Lannister had twisted the realm to its advantage for years. Yet Ned could not ignore the implicit message. Tywin would crush any perceived threat without hesitation. If Ned so much as entertained the idea of forging a secret alliance, Tywin would react with lethal force. For the sake of preventing a larger war, Ned was yet again compelled to swallow his pride and do nothing. Days turned into weeks once more. The small council resumed its usual rounds of bickering. Pycelle droning about supply shipments, Baelish winking about new trade tariffs, Varys offering cryptic commentary on rumored movements in Essos. Tywin stood as a grim overseer, Robert sank deeper into indulgence, and Ned felt the tension strangling him from all sides. Whenever he saw Cersei, he noted how she hovered near her father or near Jaime, eyes cold with suppressed ambition. Once, he overheard her mutter to Jaime in the hallway, "Are we to remain prisoners of father's watchfulness forever?" Jaime had given her a dismissive shrug. In that stifling environment, Ned found himself dreaming of Winterfell almost nightly. He pictured the gray walls, the crisp northern air, and the hot springs that fed the castle's baths. He yearned to see Robb and Bran and Rickon again, to hold Catelyn in his arms, to watch Arya run free without fear. And Sansa. He worried most about her, betrothed as she was to Joffrey. She seemed blissfully unaware of the lethal politics that lurked beneath the surface. Joffrey, for his part, was often short-tempered, lashing out at stable boys or hounds when they didn't do his bidding. Ned thought of the boy's true parentage, the product of incest, and shuddered at the notion that this child might someday become king. But that was Tywin's plan, no doubt. Eventually, Robert announced a grand tournament to be held in King's Landing to celebrate nothing in particular, just Robert's desire for sport and spectacle. Ned saw it for what it was. Another expensive frivolity, yet another occasion to throw away coin the crown did not have. He argued against it, but Robert's mood turned dark. "I will have my tourney, Ned. Don't be a craven spoilsport," the king growled. Tywin only commented that if the king wished a tourney, House Lannister would be prepared to offer funding again, at favorable terms. Ned nearly bit his tongue to keep from shouting. The city buzzed with excitement. Knights from across the realm began arriving, brightening the muddy streets with colorful heraldry. The merchants brimmed with glee, anticipating the influx of coin. Street performers flocked to the capital to entertain crowds. Sansa was beside herself with anticipation, eager to see handsome knights in shining armor. Arya rolled her eyes at her sister's fawning excitement but grudgingly admitted she found the swordsmanship displays interesting. The day of the first just dawned clear and warm. Tents sprouted like mushrooms in the fields outside the city walls. Ned, dressed in his formal attire as the hand of the king, sat in the royal box beside Robert, who was in a cheerful mood, guzzling wine from a jeweled goblet. Next to the king sat Cersei, radiant in a green gown. Tywin sat on Robert's other side, expression unreadable as he assessed each competitor. Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella were also present, with Sansa close by. Arya sat further down, near the seats reserved for highborn ladies, fidgeting restlessly. When the jousting began, the crowd roared with delight. Lords and knights displayed their skill, charging down the lists in a thunder of hooves and splintering lances. One after another fell or triumphed. The Hound, Sandor Clegane, unhorsed two challengers in brutal displays, earning murmurs from the crowd. Ser Jaime Lannister joined the lists as well, wearing the gleaming white armor of the Kingsguard, and dazzled the onlookers with his prowess. After one victory, he trotted near the royal box, removing his helm to flash a golden-haired smile at Cersei and Tywin both. Ned thought he saw Tywin's mouth tighten, though Jaime was a far cry from the obedient son Tywin might have hoped for. Between the rounds, as squires cleared the broken lances from the field, Ned glanced at Robert. The king was engrossed, cheering, shouting for blood. Occasionally, Tywin leaned over to speak in Robert's ear, presumably reminding him of the bets placed or the debts owed. Ned felt a hollow pit in his stomach. This spectacle, this moment of fleeting joy for the small folk, was a veneer concealing all the rotting tensions beneath. If one spark set them alight, the entire realm might burn. On the second day of the tourney, a new competitor arrived, a mysterious hedge knight wearing no sigil. Rumor had it he was from the Reach or Dorne or maybe even Essos. He unhorsed two opponents in swift succession, drawing excited whispers. Some said he carried a personal vendetta against a certain lord. Before the next match began, Ned wandered down to speak with Ser Barristan Selmy, curious about the new arrival. Barristan shrugged. No one seems to know his name, calls himself the Grey Knight. Could be a Sellsword looking for glory. Ned watched from the sidelines as the Grey Knight faced off against one of Tywin's household knights, a formidable man known for his jousting skill. The herald's trumpet blared, the horses charged, and the Grey Knight's lance smashed directly into the Lannister knight's helm, sending him tumbling. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Grey Knight dismounted, approached the fallen man, and was heard to say something that made the knight pale. Tywin rose from his seat, eyes narrow. Even Robert leaned forward, intrigued by the upset. The crowd hushed as the Grey Knight saluted the royal box. Then he turned and walked away without waiting for accolades, leaving the Lannister knight sprawled in the dust. Whispers abounded. Was this some show of defiance against the Lannisters? The final day of the tourney came with a hush of anticipation. The Grey Knight was set to face Jaime Lannister in the semifinals. If he unhorsed Jaime as well, it would be a blow to Lannister pride. As the two riders took their positions, Ned noticed Tywin's stony expression. Joffrey looked smug, certain his uncle would win. Cersei watched with a tight smile. Robert guzzled from his goblet, clearly reveling in the tension. The horses thundered toward each other. Jaime lowered his lance with expert precision, while the Grey Knight angled his shield. Their lances met in a flash of splinters, and the Grey Knight's lance struck Jaime's shield centermass. Jaime was rocked backward in the saddle, fighting for balance, but he stayed mounted. The crowd roared. Another pass was called for. Again they charged, again the lances crashed, and this time the Grey Knight's lance snapped in half while Jaime's blow glanced off the knight's shoulder. No unhorsing yet. On the third pass, Jaime put all his skill into the strike, anticipating the Grey Knight's shield placement. But the Grey Knight unexpectedly shifted his horse at the last instant, letting Jaime's lance glance off harmlessly while his own slammed into Jaime's chest. Jaime lost his grip, toppled sideways off his mount, and crashed to the ground. A stunned silence descended on the crowd. The Kingslayer, unhorsed by an unknown knight, the Grey Knight tossed his broken lance aside and raised a fist in triumph or defiance. Jaime got to his feet, furious, and ripped off his helm. He looked ready to challenge the Grey Knight to single combat right then and there, but the herald intervened, declaring the Grey Knight the victor. Jaime's glare swept across the crowd, and his gaze eventually landed on Tywin. The older man's face was a mask, revealing no hint of emotion. Slowly, Jaime backed away, ceding the field. The final match pitted the Grey Knight against the Hound, Sandor Clegane. By this point, the city was buzzing. Who was this masked warrior daring to humble Lannisters? Ned couldn't help feeling a twinge of unease, suspecting that behind this knight's success lay some deeper motive. The Hound was fearsome, a monstrous figure in battered armor, his face scarred by fire. As they charged, the crowd roared. Lance met lance, shield met shield. Unlike before, the Grey Knight struggled with the Hound's brute force. On the second pass, the Grey Knight's shield cracked from the Hound's blow. On the third pass, the Grey Knight was thrown from his horse, landing in a spray of dust. The Hound cantered around and dismounted. The stands erupted in cheers. The Grey Knight lay still, chest heaving, but then, in a sudden motion, he pulled off his helm. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Underneath, the Grey Knight was revealed to be a woman. A young woman with hard eyes and close-cropped dark hair. Ned saw the shock on Robert's face, the stunned anger on Tywin's, and the curious gleam in Cersei's eyes. The woman struggled to her feet, looking the hound in the eye. He offered a hand, and she took it, rising amid the roar of the crowd. "Who are you?" the herald demanded. She faced the royal box. "I am Brienne of Tarth," she called out, voice clear though trembling. "And I fight for my own honor." A mixture of shock and awe rippled through the stands. Tarth was a distant island in the Stormlands, known for its sapphire waters. Ned recalled hearing of a lord who had a daughter rumored to be a skilled warrior, but he had never met her. Beside him, Robert let out a booming laugh. "By the gods! A woman unhorses the Kingslayer. That's worth a bloody story." Tywin's expression darkened. "This is an insult," he murmured under his breath, though only those near him could hear. Jaime, from his vantage point, glowered, but said nothing aloud. The hound merely shrugged as if it didn't matter to him who the Grey Knight was. In the aftermath of the tourney, Brienne of Tarth was both celebrated and ridiculed. Some hailed her as a curiosity, others as a freak. But no one could deny her skill. The final purse of gold was awarded to the hound for winning the joust, while Brienne earned the admiration of certain lords who valued courage above convention. In the feast that followed, Robert demanded that she dine among the victors. Tywin declined to attend, citing urgent business. Cersei excused herself early. Jaime appeared briefly, then departed without a word. An undercurrent of tension ran through the hall, as if House Lannister had suffered a small but stinging humiliation. Ned watched Brienne from across the table, seeing her shift uncomfortably among the ogling knights. She wore a battered tunic over her torso, her hair slightly damp with sweat. Lord Renly, still in the capital despite earlier intentions to leave, engaged her in conversation. Ned noted the respect in Renly's posture, how he treated her as a legitimate warrior. Something about that made Ned smile. Perhaps not all the realm was blind to honor. The weeks following the tourney saw a renewed strain in the relationship between Jaime and Tywin. Word spread that Tywin had chastised Jaime in private for lack of vigilance, and Jaime retorted that Tywin should joust himself if he was so concerned. Cersei, caught between them, grew more sullen. Meanwhile, Robert found fresh amusement in teasing Jaime about his defeat, occasionally calling him the lion who was toppled by a maiden. Ned sensed that each jab drove a wedge deeper into Jaime's pride. Outwardly, the realm still functioned. The city continued to fill with travelers, including merchants and spies from beyond the seas. Robert lapsed into his old habits of drinking and carousing, though Tywin made sure he did not wander too far into self-destructive behavior. The envoys to Dorne wrote back that negotiations were stalemated but cordial. The Greyjoys on Pike remained an uncertain threat. Balon Greyjoy's intentions were unclear, but no open rebellion had begun. Perhaps the old man was merely rattling sabers. As autumn crept closer, the nights grew longer and a chill settled over the city. Ned found a measure of routine in this new normal, though his concerns continued to mount. He often asked himself if a realm quietly dominated by Tywin Lannister was truly better than a realm in open civil war. Each time, he came to the same reluctant conclusion. War was the worst possible outcome, but tyranny from the shadows was only marginally better. A month later, a fresh rumor swept the court. Daenerys Targaryen had given birth to a son by Khal Drogo, a child rumored to have eyes like amethysts and a fierce spirit. This news, so the rumor claimed, came from travelers out of Pentos, who overheard Dothraki riders boasting about the stallion who mounts the world. Robert flew into a rage at the mention of a Targaryen heir, ranting that the child must be killed before he could threaten the Iron Throne. Tywin, however, counseled caution, stating that assassinating a Dothraki Khal's family on Dothraki land could spark a horde invasion. The king, grudgingly, let Tywin persuade him to wait. But Ned saw the fear in Robert's eyes. The ghosts of House Targaryen were not yet laid to rest. And so the uneasy peace endured, overshadowed by the constant threat of something worse. Each day, Ned felt the tension coil a bit tighter. He was not blind to the possibility that one move, one miscalculation, could set the realm ablaze. Tywin manipulated the king with money and quiet persuasion, while Cersei seethed under her father's dominance. Jaime's pride was wounded, Joffrey grew more vicious by the day, and the rest of the court tiptoed around the roiling undercurrents. Beyond the city walls, unseen forces might be gathering, waiting for the right moment to strike. Dorne, the Iron Islands, possibly Targaryen loyalists, any one of them could become the spark. Sometimes, Ned stood by the great windows of the Red Keep at dawn, watching the first rays of sunlight pierce the gloom. He would tell himself that, for now, the realm was at peace. For now, war was held at bay by Tywin's presence, by the implicit threat he posed to anyone who might try to move against the king. In that sense, Tywin had indeed saved Robert's life, preserving him not out of love or loyalty, but for the sake of Lannister power. And Ned Stark, bound by duty, found himself complicit in that arrangement, forced into silence by the knowledge of what war would bring. He told himself, as he gazed at the city rooftops awash in morning light, that he only needed to endure a little longer until some better solution presented itself. Surely there would come a moment when the realm could be guided to a place of truth without drowning in blood. Yet as the days stretched into weeks, that hope dimmed. Tywin was no man to relinquish power lightly, and Robert, for all his bluster, seemed content to let the lion guard him from the shadows.